the point is that the refugee issue is a genuine issue, and yet Israel has refused to allow the refugees to return. And the United Nations Relief Works Agency, which was set up by the UN with encouragement at the time from the US, which wanted to quiet the anger of the Palestinians, is now being defamed as, as something wrong. But it stands for the right of the refugees to return. So, even after 77 years, there's still the right of Palestinian refugees to return. And what we feel is happening now in Gaza is an attempt to obliterate this right, is to negate this right, is to kill everyone, to defame UNRWA and other UN agencies. And they think, and they're wrong, that they will take out the fire of the rights of Palestinians. What happened in Germany and the Holocaust is a terrible, terrible crime against humanity and should be denounced. The problem we have is that we, as Palestinian Arabs, we did not cause the Holocaust. But we are now paying the price of the Holocaust. Our country, our people, our land is being taken because the Jews were persecuted and were killed and were defamed in Europe. And then they came to live in Palestine. Some of them came before because of the Zionism. But we are paying the price of the Holocaust. We are absolutely against the Holocaust, against the Nazism. We denounce it in every possible way. But we did not cause it. I believe that our job as Christians is to tell the truth. And speaking truth to power is what attracted me to journalism, because I feel that this is one area where the Bible says the truth will set you free. And I really believe that the truth will set us free. I wish so many of our Christian friends and pastors and leaders would listen to the Bible. The truth shall set you free. Search and seek the truth about Palestine and Israel. See if we're telling the truth. See if the other side is telling the truth. See if there is a genocide, war crimes. See if children are dying of hunger. See if that's happening or not. Don't trust us. Go see for yourself.
The Bible always instructs us to love our enemies, to forgive those who persecute us and inflict pain upon us. And that has been the Christian story in the Holy Land for centuries. We paid with it with our own blood. There were so many Christian martyrs that died at the hand of many people throughout centuries. Empires come and go to Palestine, and Christian church has always stood firm in confronting injustice and fighting always for peace. Daoud Kuttab, it's so good to have you here. It's an honor to have you with us. You've had a remarkable journey as a journalist and as a voice for justice and as a Christian leader in the Arab world, evangelical Christian leader. You are also an award-winning Palestinian journalist, and I consider you a pioneer in the Arab media and a bold Christian voice in the Middle East who has worked tirelessly to challenge false narratives and elevate truth. You've written countless pieces extensively over the years and contributed to major media platforms like the New York Times, the Washington Post. If I recall correctly, you also did some work for CBS, 60-minute programs, and many other well-respected media outlets around the globe. But for me personally, you've impacted my life in so many different ways. You introduced me to the world of journalism and mentored me through some of my earliest writings. We worked on pieces together that ended up in major outlets like Newsweek, Religion News Service, and others, and nearly made one to the New York Times, hopefully one day. One thing I've noticed again and again, you deeply believed in raising up young Christian writers and journalists in the Middle East. Why was that so important to you? Was it kind of a bigger vision you've carried?
Well, thank you so much, Faris, for having me, and thank you for your wonderful mission that you're doing in Egypt, in Jordan, and Palestine, in Morocco. Everybody knows that you're doing great service to the Lord, so I want to kind of congratulate you for your work, and I've had the great pleasure to work with you because you were so cooperative. But to answer your question, I began journalism in 1980, a long time ago, And nobody mentored me at the time. Nobody supported me. I had to kind of pick up everything with my own. And so I feel it's part of my mission. I feel it's part of my duty to encourage and support. And if I use the word coach, some of my people who have the talent that just don't have the ability or the roadmap to reach media outlets and to know how to overcome the roadblocks and the restrictions and to be patient. Most of the people make one try, one effort, and then they give up. And one of the things I always try to tell people, and I told that to you, I remember a number of times, is don't give up. You will get in, and you are patient and you are willing to continue, and I think you've had results, and you will have more results. I know that you are a voice for truth and justice, and the Lord will work with you. My wife and I, 2 days ago, were opening our daily devotions, and there you came. And so we were so happy that somebody is speaking to us, and somebody we know. And so God bless you, and thank you for hosting me. And I hope that I can be of help to the people who view your podcast.
Yes, thank you, Daoud. It's really great to have you here, and I'm so excited about our conversation. I wanted to go back to Jerusalem, or the Holy Land. You were raised in an evangelical Palestinian household. Your father was Pastor Daoud Kuttab. He was an amazing man of God. He ministered across Jerusalem, Ramallah, Bethlehem, and in Jordan even. What was it like growing up in that world? And how did your father's ministry shape your early worldview?
Thank you for pointing out my dad. He was an amazing guy. He was a man of God, and he raised us to love the Lord. He encouraged us. He helped us. He coached us, and we saw God working through him. He was the leader of the Jericho retreats, the Ramallah retreats. He was a schoolmaster or principal in Zarqa at the Nazarene Church school. He was also schoolmaster in Ramallah. And so we grew up in an evangelical home. And that was also, it was a blessing, but also it was very difficult because we, our early
came with
years,
a price.
It came with a price because we... my dad was the pastor of the Church of God, a Pentecostal church, and we lived in Jerusalem and Bethlehem, and always had lots of guests who spoke and preached and praised the Lord, sometimes in ways that we were not used to, and it was a bit surprising and difficult. And of course, what made it more difficult was the fact that we were living in the first years of the occupation, and how many of the visitors were trying to convince us that that Israel, once they occupied Jerusalem, that would be the end days, and so on. And we believed in all these things, which again, we now realize that there were human interpretations of the Bible and not the Bible itself. So it was a challenging time. My parents wanted us to get an education. Right after the Israeli occupation, there was no schools, no universities. And so they took up an offer by my aunt, who lived in the States, in Jersey City, to immigrate. And so part of our life grew up in the U.S., and I went to Messiah College, a Christian school, and then I returned back to Jerusalem, and that's when my journalism career began.
So when you refer to the occupation, that's Israel occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza. Can you give us a little bit more insight into that from your perspective as a Christian living? You were living in Jerusalem at that time?
We lived in Jerusalem. My dad had a church in Bethlehem, so we kind of lived both places. Actually, at the time, we were living near Rachel's tomb. In fact, when the war broke, I was the eldest in the family. My older brother, Jonathan, was in the city. My dad was in a church conference in Germany, and I was only 12. So all of a sudden, the war began, and then I didn't know what to do. I was sitting in the balcony, and my brother came. He said, "Didn't you hear the siren? Why are you outside? Go inside. Let's hide. The bombing is happening. The war began." And eventually, we went to my aunt's home in the old city of Bethlehem, and the house and the church became a clinic or hospital for people who were injured. And I remember my cousin, who's became well known as a nonviolent advocate, Dr. Mubarak Awad, went out in the streets, and people were leaving. They were trying to, worried about the war, and they wanted to leave. And he kept on saying to them, don't leave, don't leave. See what happened to us in 1948. Don't leave, stay home. And he physically encouraged so many people not to immigrate, not to become refugees. And sure enough, many of those who left on their way walking or taking different transportation were either killed or injured on the way to Jordan. And so he was a hero for me, to stop so many people from losing their life and losing their homes and so on. Even though we lived in a house near a church, our neighbor's house was demolished in the first years of occupation, and our neighbors live in the streets, basically. So it left a big mark on all of us. The first years of occupation were quite brutal, and then we went to the States, and kind of our lives changed in a way, but then we returned home.
Yeah, and the narrative here in the United States and all around the West is that all Palestinians and all Arabs, for that purpose, want to exterminate the Jews, and they always accuse Palestinians of being anti-Semitic, and they are fighting Israel or pushing back against Israel illegal occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza as a fight, out of anti-Semitism, not as a just and they're fighting for their lives, they're fighting for their families. They don't want to be uprooted, just like 450 villages were uprooted in 1948 when Israel did not come to an empty land. It was not a land without a people, for a people without a land. As a Palestinian, even me, and we've talked about this, you and I, many times, we are pro-peace. We want to see a just and lasting peace between our Israel and Palestine, between our Jewish neighbors, our Muslim neighbors, our Christian neighbors. Our prayer is that we all live in peace. But 1967 brings memories of 1948, and now in 2025 it brings memories also of those two events in Palestinian history, where people in Gaza, 2 million people, are threatened to be expelled or driven out of Gaza to third countries they're talking, or they want to create a Riviera of the Middle East. What's your take on this?
Well, again, all of us have memories, and we grew up on the memories of the 1948 war. Of course, I was born later, but all our young age, we were told the stories. And my dad and my grandmother were the first to leave, and they went to Zarqa in April, right before Israel was established. And then my aunt, my father's sister, husband, with 7 children. One of them is Dr. Mubarak Awad and Shara Awad and Alex Awad. Their father was killed in the Musrara area. So my uncle decided it was too dangerous. And so he locked the house, and he went to join them in Jordan. And the story that we always talk about is that he came and he said, "Don't worry about the house. I locked it, and I locked it with 2 clicks. So nobody's going to be able to take our house." So when people talk about the keys that they have for their homes, we actually physically remember that story, and we always laughed at my uncle, thinking that by locking the house 2 clicks, that would save the house.
His house was in Jerusalem.
It was in Jerusalem, in what is now West Jerusalem, in the area called Musrara. And long after the wars, we went and saw the house, and we have also other houses in Katamon. My aunt's relatives from the Fatale family also have homes there that they all lost. But the point is that the refugee issue is a genuine issue, and yet Israel has refused to allow the refugees to return. And the UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, which was set up by the UN with encouragement at the time from the US, which wanted to quiet the anger of the Palestinians, is now being defamed as as something wrong. But it stands for the right of the refugees to return. So, even after 77 years, there's still the right of Palestinian refugees to return. And what we feel is happening now in Gaza is an attempt to obliterate this right, is to negate this right, is to kill everyone, to stop working with UNRWA, to defame UNRWA and other UN agencies. And they think, and they're wrong, that they will take out the fire of the rights of Palestinians. We have rights. Now, many of us, like you and me and others, are not calling for flooding Israel with Palestinian refugees. We understand. And I wrote a book called The State of Palestine Now, because I understand that there has to be a Palestinian state alongside of Israel, not instead of Israel. And so I'm one of the advocates of the two-state solution, just like the U.S. is, but they're not doing enough about it. And so I'm one of those, and many Palestinians are like me, that want to live in peace with Israel, but Israel is the one that's denying Palestinians the right to have a state of our own.
One interesting fact about Gaza that many people don't know, especially here in the West, that 70%, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're the journalist here, 70% of its population are 1948 refugees who moved south from places like Jaffa, from Ramle, from what's now known as Ashkelon. They moved as refugees in Gaza, and they set up those refugee camps. And we have also in Bethlehem, I mean, you and I are from Bethlehem, and in Bethlehem we have 3 major refugee camps as a result of, the ongoing wars between Israel and the Palestinians.
Right after Israel was established, Faris, the Palestinians from Haifa in the north emigrated to Syria and Lebanon. The Palestinians from the center, Ramle, Lod, Jaffa, moved or emigrated to either the West Bank or to East Bank of Jordan. And those in the south, in Ashkelon, in Beersheba, and all the southern areas, they immigrated or became refugees in the Gaza Strip, all waiting to return, all believing in the UN resolution that says that Palestinians have a right to return. And so
when people on college campuses, and this is what I've heard from many pastors and Christian leaders who say, Palestinians and pro-Palestine movement who are chanting from the river to the sea, they want to commit genocide against Israel. Is that how you see it?
Look, I mean, there's different understandings of this term. Right now, from the river to the sea is a reality, but it's the wrong reality. It's Israelis who control from the river to the sea. And so when Palestinian demonstrators or pro-Palestinians say from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free, it doesn't mean that it's a genocide of the Jews. It means that there should be freedom and there should be equality. And as a candidate for New York City, Zohran Mamdani said, there should be a state of Palestine and should be a state of Israel, and people should have equal rights. So people are asking simple question. Either we have one state where everybody has equal rights, or we have 2 states where people have 2 different states and they can each.
But the rise of anti-Semitism is real. I have so many Jewish friends who fear for their lives just simply because of being Jewish. Is that still valid? Do you see that as and anti-Semitism is horrible things? I mean, any prejudice, any racism committed against any group of people is so evil and must be confronted. And anti-Semitism, we know that it reached its heights or its highest point during the Holocaust in Germany, where 6 million Jews have been killed and committed the Holocaust against them. Do you see anti-Semitism as a legitimate concern also for Jews all around the world?
Well, what happened in Germany and the Holocaust is a terrible, terrible crime against humanity. and should be denounced. The problem we have is that we, as Palestinian Arabs, we did not cause the Holocaust, but we are now paying the price of the Holocaust. Our country, our people, our land is being taken because the Jews were persecuted and were killed and were defamed in Europe. And then they came to live in Palestine. Some of them came before because of the Zionism. But we are paying the price of the Holocaust. Sure, I mean, we are absolutely against the Holocaust, against the Nazism. We denounce it in every possible way. But we did not cause it. And
do you think it's the majority? Is it fair to say that the majority of Palestinian community, I mean, I know the answer to this question, but I want to ask you as a journalist and who investigate things and who is on the ground and you see what's happening on the street. Is it as portrayed, the majority of Palestinian communities and society doesn't want to live side by side by Israel? They are anti-Semitic in nature, and their fight against Israel is anti-Semitic.
You know, I mean, Faris, we're all Semites, you know, we are sons of Abraham. And so the term, I think, is a little bit uncomfortable for me because we are Semites like the Jews are. And the Jews lived with Muslims and with Arabs for centuries without any problem. And in fact, we feel that the generosity of Palestinians welcoming the Jews who were under the Holocaust running away, we paid the price for that because of our generosity. So now, there are radicals every place. There are now Israeli radicals, Jewish radicals who, say from the Nile to the Euphrates and so on. You know, I think if you go by the radicals, of course, you know, it's not a scientific way. And if you talk to somebody who's starving to death in Gaza today, you know, it's like somebody having a gun on your head. You don't trust or you don't give credibility to people who are under such pain. I think in a normal way, and we saw that right after the Oslo Accords, there was people who were out on the streets with olive branches celebrating the possibility. And the Palestinian Intifada, which now is being defamed as being against the Jews, as being genocide, is the Palestinian Intifada. That was one of the people who was the first to actually use the Arabic word Intifada in the LA Times, the New York Times. I introduced the term. I helped introduce it to the Western world. For us, the Intifada is a shaking off. You know, even in the Old Testament, we see stories and verses that actually, if you look at the Arabic Bible, you see the word Intifada. People shook off the yoke of slavery. So shaking off and refusing to live under occupation is not the same as demanding or wanting genocide to your opponents. Palestinians who started the Intifada said, we are against the occupation, not against Israel. We want to live state as the Palestinian state alongside of Israel. And that's why the international community all celebrate two-state solution. But you know what? They all recognized one of these two states, Israel, immediately. Within 5 minutes, the U.S. recognized Israel. Until now, the U.S. is refusing to recognize what they call for. They say, we support the two-state solution. What are the two states? Palestine and Israel. You recognized Israel in 1948, and you're still waiting, I don't know for what, to recognize the Palestinian state. Now, you know, the French finally are, you know, maybe waking up and saying, yeah, we are, you know, we can't deal with double standards, and we need to recognize also the Palestinian state. But, you know, Zionist pressure on the UK and in America is slowing that down. But still, Palestinians want to live in peace. Palestinians want to live. Now, the people in Gaza are not even allowed to eat and live. So, you know, we want to live in peace, whether it's in one state, whether it's in two states, whether it's in 20,000 states. People don't want to live under occupation. Jews left Egypt because they were under slavery. We don't want to be slaves. We don't want to be occupied. We want to be free men and women. And I think idea of a Palestinian state alongside the state of Israel is the proper and most pragmatic solution to a conflict that's gone on for over a century.
Well, I would like to go back to your journalism career because it's just so fascinating, and we all have turning points. I remember driving with you in Jerusalem. That was last year when you told me about the time you spent in prison. You said that that season changed your career in journalism forever. Would you be willing to share with our audience what happened and how God used it?
Well, I've been imprisoned by Israel and by the Palestinians. In a way, some people say that that's a proof that I'm a neutral, honest journalist. But what happened is, at a very young age, and I just graduated from Messiah College with a business degree, I met the owner of a Palestinian newspaper in Jerusalem. He said, "Daoud, I want you to go and run my newspaper." And, I just finished college. I didn't know how to run a newspaper. And it was really a very bad job. I hated the business side of journalism. But at that time, the owner wanted to start an English language version of Al-Fajr, the Arabic newspaper. And so I used to go at night, single, had nothing to do, and I did the copy editing. I would fix it. And then one day I decided, you know what, I'm going to write an article. So I wrote something, and I went to the printing press, and the newspaper came out of the printing press, and I opened it, and I saw my name, and somehow the bug of journalism, I got caught in the bug. And then I realized soon that there was censorship in Israel. And I was, as a manager of the newspaper, I had to go and get approval every night for our newspaper. And the building, it's called Beit HaGron, where all the major, Chicago Tribune, New York Times, Boston Globe, all were based in the same building where the Israeli military center was. And so I was really upset that I grew up in America. I knew what the First Amendment was all about. And I had to go and get the Israeli military to say, yes, no, this is not allowed, this is wrong. And I said, I would love to stop and talk to these American journalists and tell them what's going on. Eventually, I met most of them, and I became a fixer, translator, whatever. And one day, the censorship had got so bad that we went on a small demonstration against censorship, and then we were arrested. It wasn't very long, and so that was my first experience in an Israeli prison. It didn't last many days, and then when the Oslo Accord began, I again started covering the Palestinian government as a journalist. And again, I ran into a problem that we were covering some of the corruption stories in the Palestinian government, and then the Palestinians arrested me. And so I was like in jail for another few days. And I realized when I came out that, people were saying, awards, and you keep saying award winning, because I won all these awards because I was arrested by the Israelis and the Palestinians. And I understand that, people think that that's, fabulous and important. But I believe that, back to being a Christian, I believe that our job as Christians is to tell the truth. And speaking truth to power is what attracted me to journalism, because I feel that this is one area where the Bible says the truth will set you free. And I really believe that the truth will set us free. I wish so many of our Christian friends and pastors and leaders would listen to the Bible. The truth shall set you free. Search and seek the truth about Palestine and Israel. See if we're telling the truth. See if the other side is telling the truth. See if there is a genocide, war crimes. See if children are dying of hunger. See if that's happening or not. Don't trust us. Go see for yourself. Unfortunately, no journalists are allowed into Gaza. Israel is not allowing a single foreign journalist into Gaza, and they've killed over 200 Palestinian journalists. So there is a narrative problem. There is a narrative that's been, going on for many years, and now even in the U.S. we're starting to see. Many of the Ivy League students and so on, they understand the truth. They know, because the legacy media is still somehow controlled by a lot of the pro-Zionist people.
But as you indicated earlier, there is always extremes on both sides, and they exist in both sides. They exist in the Israeli sides, and they exist definitely on the Palestinian side. And there are also extremists that exist in the Christian side as well. Every side has its own extreme. And we've suffered as even a region in the Middle East from political Islam who try to use terrorism as a mean to achieve their agenda. And but you've always challenged, Dawood, in your writings, in your work, you've always challenged stereotypes, whether in the West or in the Arab world. And I have two-part questions. Number one, why do you think so many Western Christians still hold negative views of Arabs and Muslims? And when I say Arabs, I'm not talking about, just people living from, who are ethnically Arabs, because, you and I, we call ourselves Arabs, but we're not ethnically Arabs. We're culturally and linguistically Arabs. We did not come from the Saudi Peninsula, as others claim. We lived in Palestine. Our ancestors lived in Palestine. We, as Palestinian Christians, even we can date back our ancestry to the times of Jesus. We're the descendant of the early church, because the church in Palestine has maintained continuous, uninterrupted presence since the day of the Pentecost. And Christians have always worshipped in Bethlehem, in Jerusalem, in all of that land. And Lebanese, for example, they're Phoenicians. They're ethnically Phoenicians, but they're linguistically and culturally Arabs. So people in the West, we have some type of confusion about identity and ethnicity. But my question is, number one, why do Christians in the West hold negative views, and sometimes it's a legitimate negative view, of Arabs and the Muslims? And at the same time, number two, why do so many Muslims in the Arab world hold negative views about Christians?
Look, I slightly differ with you that we're Arab because we speak Arabic or we're culturally Arab. We are Arab because on the day of Pentecost, as you mentioned, there were Arabs. Peter, when he spoke in languages, it said among the people that were listening to Peter and believed were Arabs. So, as you said, Arabs were in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost, and we've continued to be there. Now, yes, we are in Palestine. We are hodgepodge of so many different cultures, and we don't deny that. We are proud of having so many cultures. Canaanites and the Yabusis and whatever, all the cultures. When we say Palestinian, even when we say, there's a big fight whether Jesus was Jewish or Palestinian, I say both. He was Jewish as a faith, but he lived in Palestine. And when we say we're Palestinians, we are proud of our culture. We're proud of the Jewish part of our culture. We're proud of the Arab part of our culture. We're proud of all the cultures that live in Palestine. Are part of our culture, and so we don't need to, be isolated or narrow in our thinking about cultures. We exist. We speak Arabic. We feel that we are Palestinian. Now, why do the Christians have the stereotype? I mean, you can ask them, but I can imagine that somebody that has gone to Sunday school, somebody who went to church and read the Bible and saw different words about, Jerusalem, about Old Testament locations and so on, Bethlehem and so on, they immediately kind of connected to what they call Judeo-Christian
Biblical
culture.
Israel.
And biblical Israel. And Israel is only established in 1948. Now, they try to connect between Israel in 1948 and 3,000 years ago. And, Gershon Baskin, an Israeli, said, Jews lived in Palestine for many years, but there was always other nationalities in Palestine. Jews were never the only nationality. And that's why the two-state solution is a perfect metaphor, because yes, Jews have always lived here, and so did Arabs. And now either we live together in one state where with equal rights, or in two states where each runs its own government, or maybe some kind of a confederation. So Palestinians have always lived here. As you said, Mitt Romney once wrote that Palestinians didn't exist, and I wrote in the New York Times, we are Palestinians, and I said that my son went to the local priest in Jerusalem to trace our family, our personal family, Kuttab family. He was able to find from the baptismal book are traced for 600 years from Jerusalem, just our family alone. And so, yes, we are always been Palestinian, and there's always been Palestinians, and there's always been Jews and others. And so, the fight over the narrative, I think, is a useless and immaterial fight. Doesn't matter. Who was there? Who was there? Who owned the gold? Who Jews were here? Arabs were here? What does it matter?
Yeah, the reality is that Palestinians exist and the Jewish population exists. Muslims,
in
Jews, Christians.
July 22nd, 2025. There are, 6-7 million Palestinian Arabs, 6-7 million Jewish Israelis. We have two choices. Either we share the land or we share the power. Sharing the land means we have two states for two people. Sharing the power is equal rights for all citizens. Americans are all equal rights. As long as you're a citizen, you have a right to vote, and if you were born in America, you could be a president. That's it. These are simple solutions. But the idea of Jewish superiority, the Jews have to control all the areas, and we are like slaves and occupied people under Israeli occupation. That's why we intifada. That's why we shook off the yoke of being under occupation, and we will not accept that. If we wanted to accept that a long time ago, we would have. You just said, okay, you decide what we want. We want to be in free. We want to be free people living in freedom, either in our own state, next to Israel, or in one state. But the point that I'm trying to say is
as Christians. I'm sorry, Daoud, but as Christians, we have to confront the ideas that we don't achieve justice and peace through violence. Christian Palestinians have always been pro-nonviolent movement, and especially, you talked about your uncle, Mubarak Awad, who was a pioneer in leading nonviolent movement, because Jesus told us, the Bible always instructs us to love our enemies, to forgive those who persecute us and inflict pain upon us. And that has been the Christian story in the Holy Land for centuries. We paid with it with our own blood. There were so many Christian martyrs that died at the hand of many people throughout centuries. Empires come and go to Palestine, and Christian church has always stood firm in confronting injustice and fighting always for peace. So,
Faris, it's not enough to say that while other co-religious fellow Christians use the Bible to justify violence. We are certainly believers in the fact that we need to be free of occupation through nonviolent means. But the other side totally uses violence, and many support that violence, and many provide weapons to that violence.
Even theologically, they even provide theological cover for what Israel is doing, is land expansion and land grabs and expanding the settlements.
They used even the Old Testament examples of killing, humans, killing animals, destroying communities, and people clap or at least justify that. We cannot stand still theologically for these people. Now, we are not going to carry guns against the Israelis, but it's I think a mistake for us to allow fellow Christians to justify the Israeli military machine. It's not allowed, it's not acceptable, and certainly it's not biblical.
And this is why, for us Christian, we believe in the power of the gospel. That the gospel is powerful enough to transform people's heart so they can become peacemakers, so they can become loving, not only to God, but also to their fellow neighbors. And Jesus demonstrated this so vividly, and he taught it to the disciples when he crossed over Samaria to an enemy's territories. He defied all cultural norms, speaking to a woman. He defied political norms by going into Samaria. He defied the empire and powers and rulers by showing that God and the gospel transcends all these divisions, because God is all about the heart. When the heart is transformed, then we are reconciled with God, we are reconciled with one another. So we can peacefully exist and live side by side with our Jewish neighbors, with our Muslim neighbors, and with people who don't even have faith and they're atheists. We're called to love everyone just like God so loved the world that he gave his only son. He loved the world, regardless of color and creed and ethnicity or background or culture. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that everyone who believes in him shall not perish. He gave us life. He came to redeem that which was lost. So, but my question, Dawood, is why do so many Christians have negative views of Muslims? And vice versa. Why do Muslims even have negative views of Christians?
I think a lot of it has to do with stereotypes are built on ignorance. When you don't know a Muslim, then you can easily believe and trust and fall for whatever publicity or whatever propaganda says. Once you meet them, it's different. I don't think it's a symmetrical issue. I think more Christians don't like Muslims than Muslims don't like Christians. I mean, my wife runs a Christian school, and she daily tells me of stories of Muslim families who insist on bringing their kids to a Christian schools because of its morality, because of the biblical, of the atmosphere that it provides. They want the kids to grow up in a moral school. They might not accept or believe in Christianity, but they know that there is value to the school. There is moral value in that school, and I think we know that a lot from so many of our friends, that they appreciate and understand and respect what the Christians believe in. But I think the issue of stereotype has to do with ignorance. Once you meet people from different cultures, if you've never seen a black person, you can easily become stereotypical of them. If you only know blacks as, let's say, people who stole things, then you have a stereotype that is negative. Once you meet them and you become friends with them, you cannot have that stereotype. Mm-hmm. And I call on our friends, on our Christian American friends and others, to take time out and meet. And we have many
come
people
to the
who come
region.
and visit us in our region, visit us in Bethlehem, visit us in Jordan, and they are so impressed. They said, "You're the nicest people. You're so humble. You're so generous. You're so supportive." And I have American friends who decide to stay and live here for many years because they've seen the generosity of the entire population, Muslims and non-Muslims. So I think. Yes, I think stereotypes has to do with ignorance, and I call on everybody just to, as you said, come, meet, look up people, even in your own district. Now we have enough Arabs in America that you can go and meet people, whether it's in a church or a mosque or in a supermarket or in a gas station, and just talk to them. Open up a discussion with them, and you'll find that they are family. I mean, family people. I mean, you talk, sometimes you hear some of the conservatives saying, about family values. Well, I think Arab family values are very high.
Yes.
We know a lot of people who refuse to support liberal candidates because of the family issue. They want the country to be run with family values. So I understand that. And I think there's a lot of familiarity in cultural issues, on the issue of family, on the issue of different things like abortion and so on, that we feel actually we can meet in many places, even if they're not Christians. But you see that many Arabs really believe and support conservative values. But unfortunately, we've seen some of the conservatives take a very negative position on the Palestinian-Israeli issue. And we don't want anybody to be pro-Palestinian. We want it to be pro-peace, pro-humanity, pro-human rights, pro-justice. That's all we want. We're happy that they are supporting us, but we prefer that they support justice, that they support freedom. If they want to be free, we want to be free. That's all we want. We're not asking to do anything to the Israelis. Certainly, we're not for genocide or killing Israel, but we are being killed. Our children are being killed. Our children and women are being starved. So seek the truth. If you really want to be free, seek the truth. And that's what I do. I run a Christian Arab publication.
Yeah, that's what I want to talk to you about. You're one of the first in recent history that I know of to document the presence of Christians in Jordan and in Palestine in particular. And you advocate for their recognition, you tell their story, and you also have a magazine that goes out and publish all kind of news concerning Christians in the Holy Land. Why did
This
that
is
matter to
Easter
you so
edition.
much?
This
Yes,
is our
Milh
Easter
al-Ard.
edition of Church of Holy Sepulchre. I, as a journalist, I run a radio station in Amman. I write for many publications, but I feel that the Christian community itself is not united enough. It's not known enough, and so I started a publication both online and in paper 3 or 4 times a year in paper, and we try to talk about the issues of Christians. We have issues to do with inheritance. Sometimes women don't get the right inheritance like men. We have issues of marriage and divorce. We have issues of representation in government. We have issues in employment. And I find that there is really a strong reaction in a positive way. Now, we also have many denominations, and sometimes people fight within each other, but I try to be totally neutral. We support all the different Christian communities. We are not theological in this publication because we believe that we need to support the presence of Christians, because we believe that Palestine, Israel, Jordan should not be museums. The churches are, we want living stones, and to have living stones, we want people to stay put in their country, in their homes, and to build up their communities, and to be the salt of the earth. We call
Yes.
ourselves the salt of the earth because people, even sometimes in Muslim communities, when they talk about Christians, they say they're the salt of the earth. And I love
Yeah.
that. I love that they look at to us as the salt of the earth. That's a kind of a nickname they give us. And that's why I use the name for our publication, because I feel that we need to be proud of the contribution that Christians are given. In September, I'm planning a special edition on Christian schools. And I want to show, and I'm doing investigation of how many leaders in the Arab world, political, economic, business, art, sports, that are all Christians and studied in Christian schools. Even the Muslims, some of the top leaders in the region were all students of Christian schools, whether it's the Baptist schools, whether it's the Latin Catholic schools, but they all learned in these schools, and they got their basic education.
Yeah, those
proper
schools and hospitals and many NGOs were started by Christian missionaries, Americans,
Many more
British,
started by missionaries.
who came to
Absolutely.
our region, and they established these, gospel-centered ministries that are impacting communities until this very day.
2 weeks ago, a 94-year-old nurse, Australian nurse, passed away in Mafraq, and you knew her, Aileen Coleman, and she
Yes.
had the courage and the tenacity to work with the Bedouin community to help them with the Noor sanctuary area, where they helped heal people. And I was talking in my radio station with one of my staff, and the guy said, I was sick once and they took me to that place and I was healed. My daughter was taken to that sanctuary in Mafraq and was healed. So even though they are not Christians, but
Yes.
the values,
And she
the
spent
work,
70 years in Jordan.
she died at 94. She came as a young nurse. She lived in Palestine for a while with the Presbyterian Church in near Hebron. Then she came to Mafraq and started this hospital that was dealing with mostly lung and chest diseases. And she left huge. In her funeral, Bedouins came and they played music, Bedouin songs, in celebrating her life. And so I'm proud of what Christians have done. We're proud of what missionaries have done in our country, and we're proud of what continuous generations of Arab Christians are doing in Palestine, Jordan, and the effects of our schools and hospitals on the entire community. And
Yes.
so, yes, we're proud of these things, and I try to use my media skills and my media abilities to spread the word, to highlight success stories, to highlight people who've done amazing things. A while back I did a story on on a person from the Hashwa family who used to be an accountant, and his father was blind. And I discovered after doing a story about him that his father was an elder in the Alliance Church in the old city of Jerusalem, and his father was the first to create the Bible in Braille, in Arabic. His father, he created the Braille Bible in Arabic. So, amazing things. How many people know that a Christian from Jerusalem was the first to create the Braille Bible available to all blind people.
Amazing.
So stories like this, I love to highlight them, and I love to also challenge people on issues that they need to think about, to rethink about. Equality between men and women with inheritance is a big issue now in Arab circles. That even some of the men, unfortunately, even men in parliament, Christian parliamentarians, prefer the system where men get more inheritance or twice inheritance of women. That's not fair, and there is a strong movement now to have equal rights for inheritance. So these are issues that affect the Christian community, and I like to legitimize the entire community, including evangelicals, because sometimes evangelicals are being discriminated against, and I do stories where I talk to the Latin, the Catholics, the Orthodox, and the evangelicals all on the same level.
Yes.
And I feel like we're trying to legitimize our fellow Christians, regardless of their denomination.
You've walked through persecution, prison, political firestorms, and personal sacrifice, all the while holding fast to your calling as a Christian and as a journalist. What word would you give to the Christians around the world who love and pray for the Middle East? And how can we build bridges in a divided world?
Well, I call on them to continue to pray, to continue to consider what their fellow brethren are going through. Their prayers, their support is valuable. We value it, but we also like to have coffee with them. We'd like to visit. We'd like them to visit us. We'd like them to come and engage with us. The speed in the Middle East is not the fast speed of the rat race in America, but sit down, have coffee, let's talk, let's communicate, and let's engage in a proper way. And as I said in the beginning of your program, the truth shall set you free. I really believe that those who seek the truth will be set free. We are people who seek after the truth, and we all want to be free. We want to be free from sin, but we also want to be free to live a normal life like all other people. We are supporters of genuine equality. We're supporters of improvement of relations, and we are peacemakers. Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount said, "Blessed are the peacemakers," and we need to always remember that. Not supporting wars, not supporting, justifying it under Christian Zionist ideologies. Just be peacemakers. As long as you seek after peace, the Lord will bless you.
Daoud, thank you so much. That has been an amazing and fascinating conversation. Wishing you all the best, and hopefully we'll get in touch soon.
Thank you so much, Faris, and thank you for your mission and your work in the Middle East. We bless the Levant missions that you're doing great work here.
Thank you.